Hi, I'm Marvis from Sweet Headache, and today I'd like to talk about a topic that's probably interesting for you DJs out there. So recently I had a forum discussion with a couple of other DJs, and it was about mixing tracks with varying tempos. So you have one track that is, for example, around 100 BPM, and then you have another track that's around 140 BPM. So how do you mix these two? And a lot of my fellow DJs just said, don't do it, decide for one tempo and then stick to that. And I have to say, I disagree there. You should definitely mix tracks with different tempo. It's a lot of fun, it can make your sets a lot more interesting. And what I'm going to show you today is 5 ways to mix tracks with various different tempos. Method number 1. So this is kind of the straightforward solution. You have one track that's a little slower, you have another track that's faster, and you want to mix the slower one into the faster one. This doesn't sound like such a big deal, but sometimes you have tracks with very strongly different tempos. So for example, I have this track here that's around 114 BPM. It sounds like this. Okay, so I really love this one. It's got a cool, slow groove. But what if you want to mix it with this one? So that's a pretty straight house track, and this is around 127 BPM, so that's a lot faster. The obvious way to do this is to just use the pitch and use it a little wider than you usually would. In this case, you have to pitch up by 12%. Your typical turntable probably won't do this, but if you have a digital DJ controller, you can probably set the scale of your pitch. So this is actually quite possible, and actually pitching the slower track to the faster track can actually sound quite good. Sounds like this. So see, this is not really a big deal, and actually I would like to encourage you to use your pitch a little more wider. Method number 2. So this one's also kind of obvious. So if you have a track that is very slow or very fast and you want to mix a track with a different tempo to it, just let it finish and then just start the next track. So this doesn't work so well with a lot of club versions, but it usually works quite well with tracks that have a very clear ending. I have a little example for you here, and I'll show you that this can actually be quite okay. So this one's a hip-hop track, and I'll just play a house track next to it. A little too obvious, but actually if you do it in a set and then continue at that tempo, that's mostly fine, and a lot of people will actually appreciate that you do some variations and create some dynamics in your set. So here's method number 3. So this one works best if you have a very fast track and you want to mix a much slower one into it. If you have, for example, a 180 BPM track, like a fast drum and bass track, and you want to mix a very slow track into that, like a hip-hop track, then you can simply do that, because 90 BPM, typical tempo for a hip-hop track, is just half the tempo of 180 BPM, which is the typical tempo for drum and bass tracks. And there are even a couple of tracks that have both tempos in them and switch between the two to create more dynamics in the track. And these are especially good tracks to do that transition between fast and slow or slow and fast. Here's an example that I found. I'll clap along the rhythm so you see where the tempo doubles. So here's method number 4. I'd like to call this one loop and pitch, because what you essentially do is you set a loop, a very short loop, and then you change the pitch during that loop, and then you just fade in the new track. I used this in one of my older mixes, and there I used it to fade between 2 remixes of the same track. Both are remixes of the track Missing by Everything But the Girl. And yeah, I'll simply demonstrate how it sounds. This is the old track. The loop starts. Loop, going faster, 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 and now I'm on the new track. Number 5. This one uses specially produced tracks that have tempo changes built into them. Here's one example CD. This one's called Seiji's DJ Tools, and it has only tracks on them that have a tempo change in them. So here's a little example that changes from 100 to 120 BPM. So it starts kind of slow, and you actually need that part to mix into the track from your last track. So this one's produced in a very DJ friendly way. Now you have a long rhythm part. More rhythm. And now the tempo change starts. Again a loop. And now we're at a different tempo. So you'll notice that the track changed in between, but this is still a very seamless way to change tempos in your set. That's it. I've shown you 5 ways to change tempo in your sets. This was intended to just give you some inspiration. So please try changing the tempos in your set. It'll make your sets much more interesting. And you'll notice that it's much more fun to play a set with varying different tempos than to just decide for one speed and stick with it. And peace to all you music nerds out there.